Hey, now you could hear me. Look at that. Look at that. Even when I'm recording, I forgot to press on the microphone. So, hey, it's Jordan. Hope you're doing well. This is recorded because unfortunately, YouTube, about 9 days ago, banned us for 90 days. 90 days from live streaming. They banned us because CNN filed a copyright violation against us. We reached out to YouTube many times, kindly. We with our lawyer to explain why we did not violate any copyright. But frankly, it's easier to get the CIA or somebody from the deep state to respond to you than a living, breathing person from YouTube, which I think is how they do it, how they want it. They make it deliberately hard to speak with anyone. So they banned us for 90 days. So when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. So right now, I'm recording this to air as a premiere. What premiere is on YouTube is basically you record a video, but you could air it as if almost it's live. Obviously, I'm telling you it's not live, but you could air the video, record the video earlier, and air it as a premiere so you could have the live chat function. So, like as if we were live, you know the checklist. Make sure you smash the like button. Got to smash that like button because the more people that like the live stream, the more people that will see the live stream. So we got to get it up to as however many people are watching right now, equal amount of likes. So smash the like button even if you don't like it, and please smash the like button because public service announcement. I'm actually sick, and I'm still doing this so we could cover important stories. I have a really bad cold and need to go to bed right after this. Become a Status Coup member. We are growing quicker than ever. So right now, I believe we're at 265 paid monthly or annual members. We are setting targets to get that number to 300 by the end of this month. Actually, we would like to get it higher than that. So you could go to statuscoup.com/join, where we're uploading content exclusively for members, behind the scenes content, bloopers, a lot of cool stuff up there just for members. So statuscoup.com/join. And honestly, due to the fact that we cannot live stream on YouTube, we're unfortunately losing revenue as a result of that. So your membership is how we're going to grow, especially with this setback thanks to YouTube and corporate censorship. Also, follow us at Status Coup on the Twitter. I'm at Jordan Sheridan. Subscribe to our podcast. That's bit.ly/Status Coup podcast. When you go there, rate us 5 stars and leave a review. That's how the more high ratings you have, plus reviews, the higher the podcast moves up on iTunes. And our podcast is simply our live streams made into an audio podcast, as well as our interviews made into the interviews I do made into a podcast. And go to statuscoup.com, which you should start getting in the habit. Go to statuscoup.com every day. And when you go to statuscoup.com, you'll get a little pop-up, allow notifications. The website notifications are a lot more reliable than YouTube, who likes to notify people the next calendar year after a video. So go to statuscoup.com, click allow notifications, and join our email list. That's a super important way we're going to grow. And also, because of the YouTube live streaming ban for 90 days, email list is one of the ways we're going to be informing you of our next steps. We are currently, we just purchased something that was very expensive that I didn't want to purchase, but we really had no choice. It was about $900, a new broadcasting system that we could use in the meantime for these 90 days. So we're going to debut that hopefully this week, and we will be using it on our website, statuscoup.com. So we will be going live on the website, statuscoup.com, when this new broadcasting system is ready. So we will alert you through email, through my Twitter, but definitely through email. So join the email list as easy as going to statuscoup.com. So before I get to the news, as a reminder, a kind reminder, we are so close, so close. 48,171 buckos. Remember, our original goal was 50,000 before I asked for your permission to raise it to 70,000. So, wow. I mean, we launched this in the middle of September. So that's October, November, December, January, February. So in 6 months, we're almost at the goal. I mean, 50,000 is not the overall goal, 70,000 is, but to reach 50,000 purely grassroots donations. I mean, we didn't get any donations from like a big celebrity or a big plutocrat. It's all been you. So I can't thank you guys enough. Obviously a lot of people are tapped out. So if you can't donate, we understand. Definitely share the GoFundMe if you can, particularly since this YouTube live streaming ban is hitting us in the wallet. We really appreciate it. We do need to purchase extra equipment for the campaign trail. If you noticed during our Bernie Sanders coverage of his rally, we were having spotty signal, and that's because, unfortunately, as Ty explained, we don't have the premier live view. If you look up what live view is, it's basically what a lot of these news networks that don't have satellite trucks use, and it's basically a portable. Best way to describe it is a portable or mobile satellite. So it latches on to different cell towers and this and that to give you the best signal. We have a LiveView Solo, which was the most affordable option for us. It was about $1,500. The LiveView, the top end LiveView that the Young Turks had when Ty and I would go on the road is $15,000. So we're trying to raise more money to get that and have some wiggle room to travel to cover Bernie's campaign. So appreciate it. As we go, I hope you could donate. And of course, I already mentioned membership. That's statuscoup.com/join. And I apologize if I sound congested. It's because I'm very congested and not feeling great. So, got a couple Bernie Sanders stories. And I'm going to start with the one that I think is very, very positive. Bernie Sanders beating Kamala Harris. Bernie Sanders is beating Kamala Harris 2-1 among black Democratic primary voters, a new poll finds. This is from The Intercept. And remember, smash the like button. If you haven't pressed that like button yet, get going. And I'm sorry, this is recorded, so I can't interact with you live, but we will be interacting with you in the live chat, if that makes sense. Somebody will be interacting with you right now as the premiere is going. So, 3 weeks after launching his presidential campaign, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders is leading all other announced candidates in support from black voters, a new poll finds. The only potential candidate who polled better with African Americans than Sanders, according to the poll by Morning Consult, is former Vice President Joe Biden, who has not announced a campaign. Despite a persistent notion that his supporters are disproportionately white male bros, the new survey suggests that Sanders is actually slightly more popular among black Democratic voters than white ones, indicating that the narrative that developed during the 2016 campaign may no longer hold, if it ever did. Keyword narrative, which I'm going to get back to. Sanders' support among black voters at 28% puts him in second place among that demographic, behind Biden at 32%. He trailed Biden 31 to 25 among whites. I would suggest that when Biden actually gets in the race and more about his record that is not so kind to black people, especially black men that are in prison because of the crime bill that Joe Biden drafted, I think those polls might go down a little bit. There appears to be a strong class element at play in the finding. The same poll found that the demographics Sanders is least popular with, at 19 and 70% respectively, are Democrats who make more than $100,000 per year and Democrats who have postgraduate degrees, two qualities that typically, if not always, overlap. Because of the structural wealth and income gaps, the population is heavily white. Sanders, meanwhile, receives his strongest support from those making less than $50,000, a group that is, for the same reasons, much more diverse. The poll found that 30% of those with the lowest income backed Sanders. And frankly, the gap between white and black people in terms of earnings is significant. So I would venture to guess a lot of that under 50,000 group is African American. Senator Kamala Harris, Miss For the People herself, has half as much support at 14% among black voters as Sanders, according to supplementary polling data provided to The Intercept by Morning Consult. The findings are drawn from a sample of 2,587 black likely Democratic primary voters. Cory Booker comes in fourth at 6% among black voters. Elizabeth Warren and Beto O'Rourke both registered 4%, while Senator Gillibrand, Mike Bloomberg, who just announced he's not running, thank you, Jesus, former Attorney General Eric Holder, Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown, and others all clocked in at 1%. So, before I get to Kamala Harris and what this means, I want to talk about Bernie because I interviewed Michael Tracy, a former Young Turks reporter, which we aired yesterday, so you could go check out that interview. And I made the point that I think this notion that Bernie Sanders has a problem with African Americans was always very overblown. Any candidate any candidate that was running against Hillary Clinton, if it was just a two-way contest, I mean, let's face it, it was a two-way contest between Bernie and Hillary. I mean, the other two that were in there for 5 minutes weren't a factor. Any candidate that ran against a political machine, it wasn't just Hillary Clinton Bernie Sanders was running against, it was the machine around her. Bill and Hillary Clinton had basically been going down to the South, to churches, making inroads with the black community, not just in the South, but all over the country for 20 years. So, number one, he had no name recognition in 2016. How do I know that? I did a lot of interviews in the South, in South Carolina and other places where people, if a lot of people didn't know who he was. This was the first time they even heard of him, but it was already baked into the cakes. Well, you know, we know the Clintons and blah, blah, blah. And as a white person, you know, not just a journalist, but as a person, I was very careful not to come off condescending to those black voters that were supporting Hillary Clinton. You don't want to be like, well, you know, why don't you know what's good for you? You know, I did point out to some African Americans that I interviewed, well, what about the crime bill? What about welfare reform? What about repealing Glass-Steagall, which really harmed black people? As a result of repealing Glass-Steagall, that's what led to the 2008 global financial crash, which didn't get a lot of coverage, but more black people were foreclosed on than white people. The banks and their agents were predatory lending, specifically, even more so in poor black communities. So I think Bernie Sanders, or any candidate, was destined to get their clock cleaned, particularly in the South. Hillary Clinton had more name recognition than any other candidate probably of the last 2 to 3 decades. Bill Clinton, you know, a lot of African-American people remember Bill Clinton, you know, going on African-American TV, playing the saxophone. And frankly, a lot of voters, not just black, white too, are not so informed on what policies they were or were not for. So they just say, oh, the 90s were good, the economy was good, you know. And honestly, straight up, a lot of black women I interviewed, a big part of their voting for Hillary Clinton was first woman president. So I think this notion that Bernie Sanders has a major problem with African Americans was overhyped. Did he have a problem by way of the results? Yeah, he got his clock cleaned among older African Americans. But the schedule was also front loaded for all those states, which obviously was to help Hillary Clinton. I mean, it was shown in WikiLeaks that the DNC was making memos before Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders even announced, basically preparing for Hillary to be the general election nominee. So I guess my point is, number one, when you have no name recognition as Bernie Sanders, when you're an old white dude against somebody who's frankly beloved among the black community, the older black community, Bernie Sanders, corporate media doesn't talk about it. He won the millennial black vote, just like he won the millennial white vote, millennial Latino vote. Excuse me. So, yes, on paper he had a problem, but I think it was there's context to that. It was who he was running against, how the schedule was front loaded, and you know he didn't have enough time to. And the more time, if you remember, the more time on the schedule between primaries, the more time he campaigned, the better he did. The more people heard his message, knew who he was, the better he did. So my point is, I think what the polls are showing now, 2-1 against Kamala Harris. Is frankly, he's a known quantity now, and I also think I've always said this: every 4 years, there's millions more 18-year-olds voting, white 18-year-olds, black 18-year-olds, brown 18-year-olds, indigenous 18-year-olds, LGBT, handicap. I mean, whatever, all vulnerable minority communities. So what I'm saying is, I think his message, especially the tweaks he's making, it might seem like a small thing. And I know Ty, our photojournalist at the Bernie rally, thought he was like reading from his notes too much. Well, I watched his entire speech in Chicago. And I'm not saying this as somebody who likes Bernie. I'm saying it just on the eye test. That's the most personal I've ever heard him talk about, when he talked about getting involved in the civil rights movement and the student group to desegregate housing at the University of Chicago, and why it was personal to him. I thought it was great. And I think it's a message that's going to resonate not just with younger black people, but older black people, because I didn't know that whole story, and I do this for a living. So I'm assuming most black voters don't know the whole story. And this notion by a lot of Hillary Clinton people and establishment people, well, that was in the 1960s. What has he done for black people since? Well, his policies would help all people, but also black people. I mean, there's a lot of black people without health insurance. There's a lot of black people who have no education and can't afford school. There's a lot of black people that in their communities are the most hit with environmental toxins and pollution. I mean, just look at Flint, East Chicago, Baltimore, Milwaukee, Cleveland. These are black communities. Detroit. So I think what you're seeing right now is, number one, he's a known quantity. Number two, he didn't stop after he lost. He's been barnstorming the country. He went down to Mississippi to stand with the Nissan workers. He's been to Kentucky. He's been to Arkansas. He's been to other southern states since 2016. And number three, I think, honestly, and I've always thought this, and you got to be careful how you talk, Bernie Sanders' appeal is about class. It's not about race. So I think whether it's poor white people, poor black people, working class white people, working class black people, you know, black people don't only, and I'm speaking as a white person, so I don't want to speak for black people, but black people don't only vote based on social issues. They also vote based on their wallet, just like white people, on their kids' education, just like white people, on environmental issues, just like white people, student debt. There's a lot of things. And I think Bernie Sanders is leading more and more in a lot of speeches with criminal justice reform, bail reform, and a lot of things that obviously disproportionately are of interest to black communities. So, you know, it's the reverse for Kamala Harris, and why I said from the beginning, you know, what has Kamala Harris accomplished in the Senate that she is a better choice for president than Bernie Sanders or anyone else? There's a difference between qualified to run. She's qualified. She was a attorney general, a district attorney, and now a senator. She's qualified. But being qualified doesn't make you the right candidate. What has she accomplished? She got into the Senate and within 6 months was meeting with Hillary Clinton's top donors in the Hamptons. She has moonwalked on Medicare for All within 24 hours. She's also moonwalked. She was for free public college in December. She moonwalked to debt-free college in January. You don't think any of this has to do with who her donors are? And by the way, I'm not ready to report it now because I'm still researching, but she has a pretty big wig fundraiser coming up in Malibu, California, and some of the people co-hosting that fundraiser, kind of questionable. I don't want to report it yet because I'm still researching and I want to have my facts right, but stay tuned. So she's not a name quality. She's not a well-known quality. I mean, her biggest highlights were grilling Brett Kavanaugh and others in congressional hearings, which was good. I'm not taking it away from her, but she hasn't really accomplished anything. Bernie Sanders has, contrary to what, you know, you hear. What has he ever done? He's the amendment king. He just led an effort that for the first time, the War Powers Act is being used to try and stop the United States, supporting genocide in Yemen. He's gotten, I believe now, over 20 co-sponsors on his Medicare for All bill. Now he has a bill. I'm not in love with it being with Chuck Schumer, but fighting the stock buybacks and all this. Fight for 15. Bernie and he forced Jeff Bezos to raise the minimum wage at Amazon, in addition to twisting Disney's hand. And I'm pretty sure on the campaign trail he's coming for Walmart next. So you look at this, and I think he didn't have as much of a black problem as the media tried to paint. And you want to know how I know this? The polls support it. I mean, hold on. So, non-whites, 64% favorability rating. And this is from Gallup 2018. There's another one I saw recently. Sorry, I don't have it. He was at 73%. 73%. And I also think from this new poll from Morning Consult, well, you have the majority of your support coming from working people under $50,000, making under $50,000. Your worst support is over $100,000. Well, let me guess why those people over $100,000 don't like Bernie Sanders. Maybe they'll pay a little bit more in taxes. Maybe they think, of this mentality. There's no such thing as a free lunch, even though most of them were probably born with privileges and built-in benefits that a lot of people at that under $50,000 range didn't have. But I can promise you there's a hell of a lot more people hovering around $50,000 in this country than over $100,000 in this country, as you could see with the income inequality. So this is a good start. Let's not do jumping jacks. Let's not declare Bernie's weakness in 2016 now his strength. But he's making inroads. And I also like the fact that this isn't being talked about a lot, that he's talking about going after red states, because I agree with him. You know, Obama said in 2004, there's no such thing as blue states, red states in the United States. No, there is such thing as blue states and red states. However, in a lot of those red states, a lot of those Republicans are closet Republicans. They just don't know it. That's why you have a lot of Donald Trump supporters that when I ask them, and when pollsters ask them, who would you vote for other than Trump? Bernie is a popular choice. You want to know why? Because they voted for Trump based on a lot of progressive promises. I'm going to repeal NAFTA. I'm going after the banks. Everyone's going to be covered healthcare-wise. We're going to end these pointless wars. Did he mean any of it? Of course not. But, that's what fake populism does. When fake populism meets economic desperation and hopelessness, that's how you get a Trump. How you defeated Trump is with real populism. It's not that hard. And, we know what's going to happen based on these polls. The corporate media establishment is either going to not even cover it, Bernie Sanders at a very solid 28% among African Americans, or they're going to pretend, well, it's early and no, these polls aren't right. Every other poll is bad for Bernie Sanders. Good. Polls with him higher, well, we got to look at the context. We got to look under the hood and blah, 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 blah. As far as Biden, I think Biden is having the same thing Hillary Clinton had, frankly. Remember, Hillary Clinton, before she ran again, before she announced she was running, and that period after Secretary of State, before she announced her run, she was one of the most popular politicians in the country. She had very high approval ratings as Secretary of State. And then that period between Secretary of State and when she ran, it was a whole other story after she ran because, frankly, people saw that this is just same old, same old. And more. And obviously the WikiLeaks showed, that her campaign was basically trying to, it was extreme makeover Hillary Clinton edition. I think you're going to see the same thing with Joe Biden, not just among whites, not just among blacks, but among whites too. I mean, he is what he is. He drafted the crime bill. He was for welfare reform. He was for segregated busing. He did not come around on that as soon as other civil rights leaders did. And frankly, when they talk middle-class Joe, I think once it comes out that he too was for NAFTA, that he too is big on the TPP, Biden's going to try and run an anti-Trump campaign if he runs, just like Hillary Clinton. But people are waking up. People in the Rust Belt, people in the South, people all over the place. More and more people don't just vote on personality or who speaks to them charismatically. They're looking under the hood. That's why Bernie Sanders is so popular. I could promise you, the 13 to 15,000 people that were out there freezing their behind off for Bernie Sanders in Brooklyn, and that's part of why I think I have a cold, because I wasn't dressed warm enough. They're not there because they think he's some charismatic guy. They're there because he's authentic and he's producing policies that would help their life. And when they look under the hood at his previous record, it comes out consistent and clean, and he's not a phony. So I'd be, record this video. I think if Joe Biden announces that those numbers with African Americans, once he's inspected by actual journalists, I don't expect it to come from the corporate media, but more and more actual journalists, status quo, GoFundMe, so we could cover the campaign. Joe Biden's in trouble. Joe Biden's in trouble. And I don't think these numbers for Kamala Harris are particularly good, because make no mistake, the key to winning the Democratic primary is twofold. Number one, whoever brings out the most minority voters, and number two, whoever brings out voters who have never voted before. So it's not, Bernie does have to bring out the progressive base, which I don't think he'll have a problem with. Frankly, the way Elizabeth Warren is looking, I think she might have to drop out early because she's just not catching on, and I don't really see it happening, to tell you the truth. She's behind in New Hampshire to Bernie Sanders significantly, and she's from the neighboring state, Massachusetts. But I think Bernie Sanders, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who won in large part because she brought out new voters who had never voted or had stopped voting. I think Bernie Sanders, if he brings out more African-American voters, if he brings out new voters who haven't voted, and frankly, if he plucks away even 5 to 10% of the Hillary Clinton vote, he's your nominee. Even if they try to rig it, which we're going to talk about next, he's still going to win if that's the case. So we'll see. Before we get to the next story, again, I'm recording this, so I cannot really see, there's no changes on the GoFundMe. Want to remind you, push that GoFundMe, because we're telling you straight up, we do not have the money to cover Bernie's campaign or Tulsi's campaign at this point. You see $48,171. It's not all there. Some of it has been used on equipment. A lot of it has been used already to travel. We've been to Flint, Detroit, Dallas, Chicago, and where else were we? Oh, we're just in Ohio too. So we've spent some of the GoFundMe money on reporting, like we said we were going to do, equipment, advertising, and marketing. So right now we're trying to grow this GoFundMe because at this point we might have money to cover a rally here or there, but not a full campaign. So we are working some other angles beyond GoFundMe to get larger funding, angles that are aligned with our values, not awful plutocrats. But, that's why we're coming to you. So if you want us out there, if you believe that independent media is part of the equation, again, as I always say, we don't exist to elect Bernie Sanders. That's not my goal. My goal is to give a voice to his voters, his movement, the issues, as well as Tulsi Gabbard, who I think deserves coverage as well. So GoFundMe and statuscoup.com/join. Do both. You can become a statuscoup.com member for as low as $5 a month or $10 a month. We appreciate higher levels too, but if $10 is too much, there's $5, there's $10, and $20 a month as well, and $147 annually. So, moving on. And remember, smash the like button. Do you hear me? I'm sick. I'm working overtime for you. So smash that like button. Like your life depends on it. The more people that like this live stream, the more people that will see this. Oh, it's not a live stream. The more people that like this stream will see it. So we got more Bernie news. So he's beating Kamala. He also signed, his blood away to the Democratic Party, which I have mixed feelings on. So let's show you what's going on with this. And remember, statuscoup.com/join. Vermont Independent Senator Bernie Sanders has signed a loyalty pledge promising to run and govern as a Democrat if he wins the presidency in 2020, a new requirement for candidates that largely grew out of his 2016 campaign. Well, that's an understatement. They made this specifically for Bernie Sanders. They want him to it's like Game of Thrones. They want him to bend down and kneel to the king. The pledge Sanders signed was given to all active Democratic presidential campaigns last week. It affirms to the DNC chairman that they are a Democrat or a member of the Democratic Party, will accept the Democratic nomination, and will run and serve as a member of the Democratic Party. It's an issue that arose during Sanders' first presidential run, with concerns among some Democrats that the longtime independent and self-declared Democratic Socialist might run as a third-party candidate after losing the nomination to Hillary Clinton. At the same time that the party adopted the loyalty pledge for presidential candidates, it also made changes to the nominating process that were sought by Sanders and his supporters, like minimizing the role of superdelegates. The party rules state that a candidate must, quote, be a bona fide Democrat whose record of public service, accomplishment, public writings, and/or public statements affirmatively demonstrates that the candidate is faithful to the interests, welfare, and success of the Democratic Party of the United States, who subscribes to the substance, intent, and principles of the charter. Oh my God, this is awful. Basically, fall in line with what the Democratic Party stands for. And if you don't fall in line with that, you're not a Democrat. That's essentially what this says. So I'm not going to read the rest. I mean, you get the point. So I feel mixed about this. On one hand, I don't really give a shit what Bernie Sanders signs. And I don't really care if Bernie Sanders is running as a marshmallow candidate or an alien. Because frankly, this is Bernie's last hurrah, right? He's 77. So I'm not saying if the Democratic Party tries to rig the primary, because there is no if. They are. They're going to do it. They're already doing it. It might not be in the same form as last time. They might not be stupid enough to put it in their emails. They might just call and plant negative stories on Bernie Sanders. They might I'm going to be investigating, and Status Quo will investigate what's going on in these primary states. Are they trying to close down polling stations? Are they sending out disinformation through the mail? There's a lot of subtle things that altogether amount to voter suppression and ultimately fraud. So I see that Bernie Sanders is trying to play ball with the Democratic Party because he recognizes, just like I said on the last story, he needs to pluck away at least. He needs to keep his base, number one. He needs to expand his base, so get more people who never voted, more, like I said, more of those new 18-year-olds that are voting, and he's going to have to get probably 5 to 10% of the establishment vote, those people who voted for Hillary Clinton in the primaries. He also, honestly, in open primary states, he might get a lot of Republicans who because you could vote in an open primary. In an open primary state, you don't have to be a Democrat. He might get Republicans that are disenchanted with Trump and vote for him. But I think he's playing ball because he recognizes that he has to endear himself in some way to the establishment. So a lot of you watching, including me, might be like, well, fuck that. Oop, demonetized. Fuck that. These people rigged the primary in 2016. They're going to rig it again. And why are you signing something that is basically bending down and taking away your leverage or rights if you're what's the word? If you end up running, if they end up screwing you. Sorry, sick. Well, I say to this, Bernie Sanders has been in Washington a long time. I might be wrong. He might ultimately, even if he gets rigged again, be a good boy and step aside and honor this contract. But as far as I'm concerned, when they rigged the primary, this contract that Bernie Sanders signed is null and void. He could take it, light it on fire, or stick it up somebody's butt for all I care. Maybe himself. Because if they're not going to honor that they're supposed to be neutral, I'm talking about the DNC, I'm talking about the Democratic Party led by Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, I'm talking about the media that's in bed with them. If they're not going to be neutral, if they're not going to be doing this in a fair way, if they're not going to say, you know what, we want, we're going to try to have as many debates as possible. We're going to try and have in each state. Obviously, states depend on local board of elections. The governor sets rules. But I want to see who are on these board of elections in these states. Who are these governors of these states who were very in bed with Hillary Clinton? Are they campaigning for any of these other candidates? So there's a lot we have to look at. But basically, the Democratic Party has a part in this too. Because if they don't honor it, and I don't expect them to, then it's null and void. He could toss it out, and I say run as an independent. And I think, honestly, if the Democratic Party tries to screw Bernie Sanders again, which I think they're going to, we live in the real world. I'm not telling fairy tales to you people. It would be nice if they didn't, but they probably will. I think Bernie Sanders needs to say, screw it. I played nice with you. I went on a tour with Tom. I went on a unity tour with Tom Perez and embarrassed where Tom Perez was embarrassed. I've done press conferences and let Chuck Schumer sign on to bills with me. I've done my part. If you're going to screw me again, screw your pledge. I'm running as an independent. And frankly, if they screw him, I think in a three-way contest between, let's say, Bernie Sanders as an independent, Donald Trump, if Donald Trump is still president, who knows at this point, and, I don't know, throw in Beto O'Rourke, I think Bernie Sanders would win. I think Bernie Sanders is the best chance in American history for an independent candidate to win. So we have to take off our rose-colored glasses, which the viewers are smart, so many of you don't have rose-colored glasses. They are going to rig it. I mean, they're already starting. You see it through the media. You see it through the DCC, the DCCC, did a little visual Facebook post the other day saying, which candidate are you excited about? Conveniently, Bernie Sanders was left off that list. Credit to them, they had Tulsi Gabbard as an option, but Bernie Sanders was left off that list. Why is that? I mean, he's in the front of many polls, or number two, but the DCCC, which is the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, they left Bernie Sanders off that. Isn't that interesting? Tom Perez, he was on, I believe, with Chris Hayes last week. He was twisting himself into a pretzel to avoid saying Bernie Sanders' name. It was painful to watch, actually. Twisting himself into knots to avoid saying Bernie Sanders' name. So it ain't if, it's when they try to rig it. And frankly, it's going to take investigative reporting to break it. I couldn't have broken the Donna Brazile story, and I couldn't have broken other stories if I wasn't on the road covering the campaign. That's where you dig up dirt. That's where you hear all the good things that you then have to try and verify. You don't hear it sitting in your apartment. You don't figure it out sitting in your apartment. So that's another reason we're pushing GoFundMe for Status Coup. I know, I'm shameless, but hopefully we're getting more donations as we go. There's no amount too low. Even $5, $10, $20, we appreciate all of it. So I think, like I said, I know a lot of you are going to be unhappy with what Bernie's doing, but there is practical realities, and he does need to play ball, because the only way he's going to win that nomination is if he pulls over some of those Hillary Clinton voters. If he doesn't, he would need to bring out a record number of African Americans, a record number of millennials, and bring out a lot of new voters who didn't vote. That's not an easy thing to do. It's made easier if he gets 5 to 10% of Hillary Clinton voters, which I think is possible. Particularly, maybe not the 55 and older crowd who's, living in their little socialism bubble. Socialism equals communism, but that 40 and over crowd, he might be able, because people want to beat Donald Trump. So even if Hillary Clinton voters, that I don't think the 55 and older, but I think the 40 and older, if they think that Bernie Sanders is the best to beat him, and I think the polls, when they do more head-to-head polls, are going to show that, they will line up and they will, quote unquote, fall in line. Mark my words. So we got one more story, and this one I'm just delighted. Shocker. Hillary Clinton's campaign, her staffers, her aides, enraged, absolutely enraged by Bernie Sanders' campaign 2.0 and, frankly, his success from faithful establishment rag Politico. Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton formally made peace at a New Hampshire unity event in July 2016. I was there. It's still nauseating seeing that, where the two rivals sought to put the acrimonious Democratic primary behind them. Clinton staffers, however, weren't party to that agreement. And now that Sanders is embarking on a second run for president, they're making their true feelings about the Vermont senator known, both on the record and on background, on Twitter and on cable television. Clinton's former aides and allies are taking pains to lay out what they see as all of Sanders' flaws, imperfections, and vulnerabilities, much as he once did to their ex-boss during a primary that saw mud flying on both sides. So already, it's total propaganda bullshit. Bernie Sanders didn't talk about her flaws, her imperfections, her vulnerabilities. If he would have done that, he would have talked about the damn emails, which was it. No politician in all of America would have done what Bernie Sanders would have done. They would have talked about those emails till they were blue in the face. Bernie Sanders chose to do the right thing and not talk about those emails. It was the right thing ethically, because I don't like Hillary Clinton, but I don't even think that ranks on the top 10 of terrible things about Hillary Clinton. But politically, he hurt himself. Bernie Sanders hit her on policy, but, to this massive corporate distraction machine, those are personal attacks. Quote, I would say, and for all I know, the Sanders people might take this as a compliment. Among a lot of the major donors of the party, there's concerns that he could emerge, said David Brock, a longtime Clinton ally who founded a pro-Clinton super PAC in the 2016 campaign and later authored a public apology to Sanders for some of his bare-knuckled criticisms during the primary. Quote, there are some very dyed-in-the-wool Democrats that wouldn't at all be enthusiastic about supporting him in a general election. You know what's so great about this? And of course, Politico didn't mention that David Brock was literally in charge of a paid troll army to smear Bernie Sanders, Tulsi Gabbard, Nina Turner, Cornel West, Jimmy Dore, me, you name it. It's a paid troll army, but Russia and their trolls. David Brock is essentially saying the aristocracy, the oligarchy, the bourgeoisie is afraid of Bernie Sanders emerging. Sure, he dresses it up in very dyed-in-the-wool Democrats wouldn't be at all enthusiastic about him. If you mean by dyed-in-the-wool Democrats, multimillionaires and billionaires, yeah, I think you're right. But the problem is David Brock was a Republican. Remember, David Brock, he is a Republican, frankly. But David Brock was, a Republican and used to be on the offensive against the Clintons before he, came over to the Clinton side. So I don't think dyed-in-the-wool Democrats would be against Bernie Sanders if he had the best chance to beat Donald Trump. Everybody wants to beat Donald Trump. This is what Jimmy and I and other progressives who frankly have been consistent, there's a lot of progressives who haven't, have said. We're not deranged or critical of Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party for sport, for ratings, for clicks. It's because we want to beat Trump. It's because we want to beat Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan and Ted Cruz and Steve King and Louis Gohmert and the rest of the lunatic, racist, Islamophobic, homophobic, oligarch-loving Republican Party. That's the top priority. But the reason you become more critical of the Democratic Party is because if you don't have an opposition party to take out these extreme lunatics, then what do you have? You're left with the extreme lunatics. And by the way, this milquetoast Democratic Party, this Republican Light Party, is helping them pass 50% of the toxic shit they're passing. From bank deregulation to oil drilling to offshore oil to, this ridiculous thing. I'm going to cover it more tomorrow. This ridiculous resolution of anti-Semitism, even though Congresswoman Ilhan Omar is not being anti-Semitic, and I'm a Jew. And my father is a big Zionist. He thinks Israel could do no wrong. He thinks Netanyahu could do no wrong. And he would be mad if I said this, but I don't care. I'm Jewish. I'm proud to be Jewish. I've been to Israel. It's a beautiful country. But Israel's not perfect. And Israel has done a lot of terrible things to Palestinians. And as an American, you have the right to say that. It's not, I pledge allegiance to the flag of Israel. So the Democratic Party is signing their names on some toxic shit. Ilhan Omar is right. AIPAC, like the NRA, like a lot of lobbies, are buying off the politicians. That's not anti-Semitic. She has plenty of nice things to say about Jewish people. I've seen her say it. Anyway, I'll talk about that more tomorrow. But it's so amazing because David Brock is literally admitting that it's the high-end, elitist, millionaire and billionaire donors that don't want Bernie Sanders to emerge. You're not, he doesn't realize it. He's gifting Bernie Sanders. That is a gift, what he's saying to Bernie Sanders. You might be for the working people and everything, but like the what did he say? The dyed-in-the-wool Democrat is not enthusiastic. Well, according to the polls, they're pretty enthusiastic. According to the polls, let's see. 78% favorability rating, and that was in September among Democrats. 54% among independents. And by the way, on the independent point, I sent out a tweet this morning, a thread, at Jordan Chariton, by the way. Twitter's suppressing me too, so make sure you follow me at Jordan Chariton and click on, if you want to get a notification when I tweet. You have MSNBC and this woman, Stephanie Ruhle. She used to be a reporter for Bloomberg. She loves Wall Street. She bows down to Warren Buffett and to Michael Bloomberg and all these people. They keep talking about, what about the vast middle of the country that don't want Bernie Sanders and the extreme left, as she called it? Who's going to win out? The extreme middle of the country and what they want, which is like a centrist like Joe Biden or Michael Bloomberg, or the extreme left? I tweeted this. Literally, you are saying things that are factually incorrect. You are a propagandist. There is no vast middle of the country. There's independent voters. Independent voters that either lean left or lean right. Frankly, most independents lean left. And guess what? Bernie Sanders, not by a small margin, by a big margin, has the highest favorability rating of any politician in America among that middle, the independents. So you could keep saying it. You could keep framing that there's this, vast middle of the country that don't want the extreme left. But apparently by the polls, they do. Let me fix this. Apparently by the polls, they do. And another thing. Apparently, by the polls, and MSNBC, like their anchor, should just do some research, or they're just intentionally, covering it up. According to the polls, it's not just the majority of the country, 70% that want Medicare for all. It's the majority of Republicans. There's other polls that say not just the majority of the country that want to raise taxes on the wealthy and corporations, the majority of Republicans. Free public college is polling high among Republicans. $15 minimum wage, polling high among Republicans. Ending our involvement in all these foreign wars, polling high among Republicans. The main difference is the immigration, which polls incredibly high, the anti-immigrant fervor. But on mainstream economic issues, the majority of the country ain't in the middle, to the left. Even Republicans are signing on for progressive policy. So the Hillbots might not like it, and the Hillbots mean MSNBC, CNN, all these people, but that's the facts. These are the facts. So, Brock and Sanders would be hard-pressed to unite the different... Brock said Sanders would be hard-pressed to unite the different wings of the Democratic Party, and his ability to raise vast sums of money through small donations could ultimately result in him staying in the race past the point when he could win, which, quote, is not necessarily good for the eventual nominee, and therefore could be helpful for President Trump. Oh, here we go. They're already telling him to fall in line, even when he's kind of the front runner, at least among, I mean, to be fair, Biden is polling slightly better than him, but he's the front runner among candidates who announced. It's a familiar grievance, one that many Clinton allies lodged against Sanders in 2016 when he refused to concede, even after it appeared he had little mathematical chance of winning the party nomination. Jeff Weaver, top advisor to Sanders, who ran his campaign in 2016, shot back that Sanders' grassroots army of supporters, quote, could make him the nominee, and dismissed the notion that the absence of large donors would hurt him in a general election. Quote, it's not a secret that people who would hang out with David Brock would be putting their class interests instead of the party and the country. Boom! Knock him out, Jeff Weaver. Figuratively, not literally. We have got to nominate somebody who is going to energize and excite the grassroots, not a handful of billionaires. In recent weeks, former Clinton aides have blasted Sanders for everything from his policy record to his campaign kickoff speech to the composition of his small dollar donors. The attacks come as Sanders is in the midst of a successful rollout, raising $10 million in less than a week into his 2020 candidacy and attracting a combined 25,000 plus people in his first two kickoff rallies. Also has 1 million volunteers, which is amazing. And this I couldn't believe. When Sanders pulled in $1 million in the first 3.5 hours of his campaign, Adam Parkhomenko, the former director of grassroots engagement for the 2016 campaign, for Clinton's 2016 campaign, only half were named Vladimir. Oh, God. I mean, what can you say to this shit? And I've already told you. Folks. You wait. You wait till they start saying, and the Hillbots and MSNBC and CNN and the Washington Post, you know, I'm sure they'll break the record. There'll be 25 negative stories in a day. Well, wait. Bernie Sanders and Jane Sanders, they honeymooned in Russia. Well, why did they honeymoon in Russia? Who did they talk to in Russia? Where did they eat? Where did they sleep? What was the weather? Do you like my Russian accent? So apparently, half of the $1 million was from Vladimir Putin. That's one of Hillary Clinton's top campaign aides. In a February op-ed for NBC, Zach Petkanis, the director of rapid response for Clinton's 2016 campaign, slammed Sanders' past positions on gun control, immigration, and same-sex marriage, which I find amazing because Bernie Sanders was for same-sex marriage way earlier than any other politician when it was extremely unpopular. And I think the gun control stuff has honestly been unfair, dating back to 2016. And after Sanders' first rally of this weekend, former Clinton campaign aide Zerlina Maxwell claimed on MSNBC that Sanders, quote, did not mention race or gender until 23 minutes into his speech. She later walked back her comments somewhat after critics, including former Sanders campaign staffer Waleed Shahid, noted that Sanders talked about racism and sexism much earlier in the event. And I want to say something about that. And this might get me in trouble, but I don't really care. Because I tweeted this at Zerlina Maxwell. I don't know Zerlina Maxwell at all, FYI. And I don't particularly care. But I think Sean King basically said, like, you're lying. I mean, he talked about criminal justice reform, I think, within 6 minutes. He talked about other race issues way earlier than 23 minutes. So you're just not being honest. So she writes back basically not acknowledging that she lied. And it's okay if you could be wrong. She could have just been wrong and missed earlier in the speech that he talked about it and just say, you know, my bad. Kudos to him. You don't have to like Bernie Sanders to just admit you were wrong. But then she says, and be careful calling a woman of color a liar. Get the fuck out of here with that shit. I'm sorry if this isn't PC, but I don't care if you're glow-in-the-dark purple. If you're going to put out propaganda that's nonsense, don't hide behind your gender and your race. This is the problem with identity politics. It allows people who are putting out falsehoods, that are remaking their brand and their image on the fly, that are saying things that aren't true, that are inconsistent, to cloud themselves under a veil of racism and sexism. I think racism and sexism exist. I do. I think there was sexism against Hillary Clinton. It's not why she lost, but I think it was a thing. But you could have racism and sexism, but not hide behind it when you're putting out things that are wrong. You know, I can't say if I put out something that's wrong, oh, I'm a Jew and I'm pale. How dare you call a pale Jew a liar? I'm not trying to be racially insensitive. I cover a lot of issues that are particularly important to African American communities. But I find it outrageous that somebody like Zerlina Maxwell would tweet out, be careful about accusing a woman of color from lying. If you're a liar, you're going to be called out. If you're saying things that aren't true, you're going to be called out. Do you expect not to because you're a woman of color? It's ridiculous. So if people don't like me saying that, so be it. But that's the truth. And that's why I criticize white people, black people, purple. I don't care. If you're putting out propaganda, you're going to be criticized, and you should expect to. You're a public figure. If you're putting out how, Bernie Sanders didn't talk about race or gender till 23 minutes in, well, if that's provably false, do you expect people to just be like, hey, can I invite you over for tea and talk about the discrepancies? Come on. Anyway, I digress. Sorry, I got a little off topic. Sanders, all too aware of the knock from Clinton supporters in 2016 that his fans were abusive online, has sought to encourage party unity. He sent an email to more than 100 surrogates last month calling on them to, quote, engage respectfully with other Democratic contenders in 2020. As we engage with our opponents in the Democratic primary, we will forcefully present our views and defend ourselves against misrepresentation, he said. But let us do our best to engage respectfully with our Democratic opponents, talking about the issues we are fighting for, not about personalities or past grievances. I want to be clear that I condemn bullying and harassment of any kind and in any space. I personally didn't think this was necessary. I think it adds credence to attacks on him that there's such a thing as Bernie Bros harassing people online. I don't know why he did it, because I don't really see his supporters harassing people online. I see his reporters pointing out that O'Rourke's not progressive, Kamala Harris isn't progressive. If that's harassment, then we need to grow up, frankly. They also knocked him for not kissing Hillary Clinton's ring enough. So still, Sanders doesn't pretend he and Clinton are pals. When he was asked last week on The View whether he would seek advice from Clinton, as other 2020 contenders have, there was no artifice in his answer. I suspect not, he said. Hillary and I have fundamental differences. His answer didn't go over well with Clinton allies, who viewed it as a poke in the eye. I don't know who our nominee, quote, I don't know who our nominee is going to be, but I'm damn sure that beating Trump and getting America back on the right footing is going to require a unified Democratic Party. So crap like this 613 days before Election Day is irresponsible, counterproductive, and sets us all back, tweeted Clinton spokesperson Nick Merrill. Wait a minute. Let's get this straight. So Bernie Sanders should seek guidance from the candidate who had the highest unfavorable rating of any Democratic nominee in American history. Okay? The most unpopular Democratic nominee in American history. He should seek guidance from that person. He should seek guidance from somebody who lost to a used car salesman reality TV show host. He should seek guidance from somebody who literally, after she lost, set up a ridiculous narrative that Russia stole the election from her. He should seek guidance for someone who forgot to campaign in Wisconsin, who pulled volunteers out of Michigan, who was strategically dumb enough to go to Arizona instead of Michigan and Wisconsin. Do you want him to lose? Do you want what do you want him to seek guidance from her for? About what? They don't agree on policy. I mean, he's not saying she's Lucifer. He's saying, no, I'm okay. I'll seek guidance elsewhere. So, to unify the party, you have to kiss the ring of the candidate that lost in one of the most embarrassing defeats in American history? No, thank you. No, thank you. Am I being too harsh to my friend Hillary Clinton? So basically, the Hillary Clinton supporters, you could tell by this piece, they are enraged because Bernie Sanders is not popular among their fat cat donors. They're enraged that he's not kissing Hillary Clinton's ring enough. So at least, they're kind of casually admitting that there is a class war and they're on the side of the wealthy and the elites and the bourgeoisie, not the proletariat. Because if David Brock, if Hillbots cared about beating Donald Trump, well, who's got the momentum? Let me tell you something. If Beto O'Rourke came out of the gate raising $1 million in a day, $10 million in a week, 1 million volunteers, they'd be calling the election. They'd skip the primary. Let's go. Let's go. Everybody should bow out. It's Beto time. Same thing with Biden. Same thing with Kamala. So I digress. Had a couple more stories I wanted to cover, but frankly, I'm not feeling great and I need a nap. So I'll get to it tomorrow. One of those is, if you recall, thanks to your GoFundMe contributions, we just covered General Motors laying off a hell of a lot of workers. They laid off 15,000 people in total in Detroit, Ohio, Maryland, Ontario, Canada. And today was the last day of the General Motors plant in Lordstown, Ohio, where they laid off, I believe, 1,500 workers. I did an interview from there during this reporting, so I'm going to cover that tomorrow, because what the corporate media is pretending is the reason these plants are closing down. They're obviously, CNN, I saw a segment, they just regurgitated what General Motors told them uncritically. Well, General Motors is lying, just like Walmart, just like Amazon, just like Sears, just like all these companies. They're just lying about the reasons. So we'll get to that tomorrow, and hopefully I feel a little better so I have a little more energy. If you want to give pity donations, I don't feel well. I'm a little burnt out, and I've been working 7 days a week, which kind of catches up with you basically for 6-7 months. So I got to take a nap. Thank you for however many people donated to GoFundMe, and we will have an announcement coming up soon about where we will be going live, because we're going to be going live going forward. We had to purchase a $900. God, that pains me that we had to do that. We had to purchase a $900 software to go live on our website and for it to look good and have a chat function. So hopefully you'll help us make up for that lost revenue, as well as the lost revenue from not being able to go live on YouTube. Thank you for watching. Remember, statuscoup.com/join. If you liked our coverage at Bernie Sanders' first rally, if you liked our interview with Tulsi Gabbard, if you like our coverage in Detroit and Ohio and Flint and Chicago and Virginia and Dallas and wherever else we've been. By the way, we're basically at our 1 year mark, so we're going to be doing a nice little show and tribute. We want to do it when we could go live so we could interact with you. But we're at our 1 year mark. We just passed 30,000 subscribers, even with all the suppression on YouTube. So thank you. 30,000 subscribers. Unbelievable. I would have never, ever in a million years thought we'd hit 30,000 subscribers in a year. We're almost at, between Patreon and the website, we're almost at 600 paid members/patrons, which is how we're going to grow long term. So thank you. I love you. We'll be back tomorrow. Remember, most people are not lacking compassion. Most people have no fucking idea what the hell is going on. Peace out.